Welcome to Pickle Lane. I'm Josh.
And I'm Erin. And apparently, we have a lot to say.
I lived with chronic illness for years and then finally healed using a technology called bioenergetics.
Through that experience, we co-founded a holistic wellness brand called Ruti.
We've learned a lot, to say the least, and we want to share it with you.
We'll explore mindfulness, wellness, and spirituality.
Topics ranging from pooping out parasites to breathwork and even traveling to parallel universes.
We spent a lot of years not living authentic to ourselves.
So our hope for Pickle Lane is to help you find your freedom and pick your own lane in life.
Tune in to a new episode of the Pickle Lane podcast every Friday on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
And subscribe and review if you haven't already.
We hope the show resonates and we can't wait to connect.
Welcome to Pickle Lane.
Hi, everybody.
What it do, baby boo?
Here we are.
Wow, that was such a good podcast.
I know. I'm very excited to share this one.
Holy shit, Lauren is epic.
Yeah. So just for the audience, Lauren, I was going to say Ledbetter, but I'm pretty sure her married name is not Ledbetter.
No.
McKinley?
Yep.
Yes. Is a beautiful kind of friend from another era of ours.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about. But we had a mutual friend that said, you guys need to connect. You're on very parallel spiritual paths right now, which was interesting.
Yeah. I didn't know what the podcast, like what this episode was going to be like.
Yeah.
Wow. It was awesome.
It was a really good one.
Yeah. I am for sure going to go be with horses.
Yeah.
10,000%.
Josh found a new hobby.
Yep.
Can you tell the people who is Lauren?
Yeah. Lauren is, she lives in Nashville and we've been friends for probably about 10 years. She is a designer. A very, very talented designer. She mostly does brand design and helps curate to turn brands into really, really successfully designed
She makes beautiful
pieces of art. Yeah, we kind of became friends through mutual friends. We kind of just were that for a long time.
She and you actually both for a while were kind of like I was going to say she was like the little mayor of Nashville because she just knows everybody. And you were similar earlier on, like when we were college aged.
Yeah.
You guys just knew everybody.
Really well together. We're very similar personalities. The boy and girl version of our personalities to the T. Our aesthetic is very similar. Our design habits are very similar. Our professions are very similar. Our friend groups are very similar. So we cross paths a ton.
Yeah.
And then she's from Seattle. I'm a super big Seahawks fan. So we would watch football games together. There were just so many different overlaps. And that relationship kind of just was nurtured through those experiences. We never really got on like super deep levels, although we did every now and then. But then kind of our paths went their separate ways. She went to Seattle. We came to Columbus. So when somebody reached out to me being like, hey, you need to have Lauren on the podcast, I was kind of like, okay, like I haven't talked to her in forever and why, but it proved to be an epic podcast. So I'm excited for everyone to listen to this one.
We talked a little bit about this, but I was always not intimidated by Lauren. Like she was never intimidating. I just remember feeling really uncool compared to Lauren, which we'll talk a little bit about on the podcast, which I mean, that's a common story for me and other people
in Nashville.
Ugh, everybody's so beautiful there. It's like, ugh. It was cool to see her in a completely different light and different perspective. We have a whole lot in common.
And she's just freaking blossoming right now.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're all going through our own things, but coming out on the other side, pretty freaking beautiful.
If anything, I just kind of hope this podcast is a bit of an encouragement to anyone who's kind of in the thick of it, because it's just good to hear people's stories, you know, that agreed. It kind of takes a season of whatever, drought or a season of pain or a season of suffering, whether that's physical, emotional, whatever. It takes those seasons sometimes to really compel us to live the life that we're meant to live. Yeah, and so 100%. It's hard to know that in the thick of it. I hope that is true of this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it was encouraging for me. And
me too.
I hope this is encouragement because I know we talk a lot about like chronic illness stories and these deep, dark, terrible journeys of plummeting health and things like that. Everyone has their own journeys, and it doesn't have to be like Lyme that pulls you into this dark night of the soul that blossoms you out into this beautiful butterfly. Everyone is going on their own journeys, and there's pain and there's not fun things, and feelings don't last forever, and a lot of pain doesn't either. And working really hard on yourself and re-regulating and prioritizing fully understanding yourself is going to have positive effects on you. And Lauren is a great example of that.
Yep. One day we're going to talk about how we can learn from like joy and love too. But
That's the lanes we're picking, babe.
Why is it always going to be hard,
So
Blatch?
get on this train, y'all.
Yeah.
Pick your own lanes. Find your freedom. Excited for you to hear the podcast.
Love you guys.
Okay, so before we started the podcast, before we started recording, we were talking about how Laura, my business partner, was like, dude, you need to have Lauren on the podcast. And I was like, why? Because backstory, we've known each other probably close to 10 years now.
That's wild.
Wild.
It feels...
We don't need to talk about the start.
Yeah, true. How it started was quite unique.
Tucked away.
But I'm thankful for it because here we are.
Yep.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me freaking too.
So we've known each other for a while. Aaron came along eventually, but we've known each other for about 10 years.
That's honestly my relationship to everyone is just like
true.
A third degree via Josh.
Via me.
Totally.
But we knew each other and we've worked together and we've done some life together, but we were two completely different people when I was in Nashville. So that's how I know you, is how we left. And I would imagine up until this podcast is how many people in Nashville knew us, unless they listen to this podcast or see us post something that leans into our spirituality or whatever. And Laura was like, no, dude, you need to talk to Lauren because she's changed. And not saying that not changing is bad, but you more aligned with the podcast. And so I was like, shit, maybe I should reach out. And then you reached out.
Yep.
And I was like, there it is, universe dropping some mics.
Yep.
Silver platter. Yep.
Yeah. But out of nowhere, Laura said it. And then out of nowhere, I know you were talking to Laura, but then you popped into my DMs and I was like, shoot.
We do need to talk.
We do need to talk. So you can be as transparent as you choose and you could say whatever you want or don't want because people in Nashville do listen to this podcast now. So
Cat's going to be out of the bag.
Yeah.
If you say
and I don't,
Right,
I want you to
right.
feel comfortable in whatever. So there's no pressure in whatever you say. Just know that. Like, we're not trying to fish for anything. But why are you on this podcast?
Give us the
We
deep
genuinely
question.
don't
Great
know.
question.
Spill the tea,
Great
Lauren.
question. I know. Why are you here? I was asking myself the same question. It's funny. I feel, and we were saying this right before we were starting to catch, or before we hit play, is it's been really hard to evolve in Nashville.
Yeah.
To your point about people not knowing or understanding or knowing an outdated version of you, I'm still grappling with it. And it's like some of the closest people in my life have no idea the like healing or the processes in my day in which I'm like really attuned to. And it's weird. I don't even know the right way to put it. It's like evolving into the best version of yourself is sometimes really lonely.
Yeah.
And so I think you and everybody else, I think Sean gets a front row seat to it.
Yeah.
And even some of that, I'll do some of my super weird stuff once he leaves for the day.
Yeah.
We get it.
That happened a while for me too. There were like things that I was doing, or you and I had DM'd back and forth about like a random quantum leap or something. How like Sean walked in on you while you were quantum leaping in a shower or something. And I would go into the room and be in this moment and be quantum leaping. And I have these out of body experiences, which is interesting because I hear many creatives have similar experiences into that, like designers and things like that. But I'll like go out and I feel like I look like a corpse laying in my bed or something. So I don't want Aaron to be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Literally.
Yeah, it took about a year before I felt comfortable enough that, okay, she's at a place now where I could talk about my crazy, weird experiences and she's not going to look at me. Yeah. But then Aaron got on board and now she's doing her own thing. But it takes a while even for your partner to start to see you shift.
Yes, 100%. And maybe the backstory is worth noting too, because it didn't start out that way. I feel like it started out a little more simple, but I had all sorts of health stuff that just sent it like, and I'm such an open book. So if this is too much,
Nope.
Never too
Girl,
much.
we talk about pooping out parasites. We talk about ovulation. It's good.
I love it. I love it. So in 2021, we had an ectopic pregnancy, which was physically so taxing.
Yeah.
Emotionally, it was fine. I say fine. We knew for about 24 hours before we knew something went sideways. So I don't feel like we had all of that. We were still in shock, but it was so physically taxing. And it was the first time in my life that I felt so clued into not trusting my body. It was equal parts. Something is wrong or something didn't go right.
Yeah.
And then also my body knows exactly what to do. And so it was this holding this duality of this is like pretty horrifying. And also my body knows exactly what to do to heal. And then the short version of it is I had fibroids and dermoid cysts and all this stuff that they found. And I'm so thankful it happened because it really did save my life in a lot of ways and save our fertility journey moving forward. But then it was the following summer, it was a huge, massive open surgery under for 6 hours.
Wow.
And same thing. It's like I'm in both hands. In one hand, I'm watching my body, there'd be something wrong. And then in the other, I'm watching scars heal. And like my body knows what to do. And so that was the catalyst for healing in so many ways where I was like, internally, I need this too. I think I need to acknowledge where things have fallen apart or need healing or need surgery. And I also know that my body knows what to do. And so I think I kind of went off, not off the deep end, but it was one of those seasons of just, I'm going to try everything.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's weird or out there. I'm going to go all in. And why would I not? What would be the holdup? And I found this newfound freedom in attempting to heal, both physically and emotionally and mentally and all the things. And then it was like, oh shit, I kind of love this.
Yeah.
So it started off slow. And then it was like, well, I'll try anything. Who am I to say?
Yeah.
So that's the short of it. Happy to go into more detail
No,
for
that's
sure.
great. It seems like in so many ways, especially in the realm that we all were in before we shifted and evolved, there had to be like this wake up call. And I
Yes.
hesitate to say wake up call because people that are still in the places that we may have been before, in so many cases, are thriving and they are awake in their own ways. But for us, it wasn't where we were meant to be. And so, in order
Yep.
for us to shift and evolve, we were so complacent blindly that there had to be this crazy shake. Maybe we were just talking about it on a walk. I can't remember if I've said it on the podcast before, but I have this theory that types of illness, like for me, the chronic illness with all of my journey, similar, just your story that you shared, I feel like it's the universe shaking us and being like, wake the fuck up. You have a greater purpose here and you're not playing the cards that you need to be playing. And I can go into the idea of, I think there's ancestral things that play into that, where I think past me's, whoever I was, also needed to be waking up, and there were multiple attempts and it didn't happen. And so I had to get laid up on my ass and almost die because that was the only way I was going to recognize that I was doing something different.
Yeah.
Do you feel that similar experience in your journey?
1,000,000%. Yeah. And I think it started long before anything physical. That was just the last 2 years. Let's see, in 2017, I feel like that was my life got shaken up in a way where I made some bad business decisions and found myself moving out of my perfect little house in Sylvan Park. And one of my dogs had passed. I was just like, I got to get out of here. I put all my stuff in storage. Shaken up is the only way I can put it. It was like, and that's when I ended up going back to Seattle, and I meant to just go for the summer. And the intention was just like, I've got to be able to breathe. I can't breathe in Nashville. It feels like a petri dish. I bump into this person, then I turn around and I bump into the other person. I got to get out of here. I have a crazy story from Seattle. I've only ever been able to like retell it, but I moved back to Seattle. I just need a breath of fresh air. I had no idea what I was doing. I woke up one day and I'm in like a rental condo. My dogs are gone. My stuff is in storage. It was so traumatic. And it was like I have been stripped of everything that made me impressive, everything that made me complacent, everything that made me the Nashville me, the one that was so fun and always going out and always doing the things and at everything and successful and cute and fun, and the house was perfect and all the things, the dinner parties and
that was definitely my perception of you, Lauren, for sure.
Really?
Yeah. You had it all together, girl. In my perception,
I really think that needed to be burned to the ground, and it was so uncomfortable. And so I oddly think that set me up for the last couple years, the physical version of that, where it's like, I know that I can be knocked down and get back up, and it's meant to be in a way that's outside of my understanding.
Yeah.
I've been really inspired recently by people with these types of stories because I think it's, first of all, it's so easy to look at your life circumstances and feel like I'm missing something, I'm so behind, or whatever it is, whether you don't have a partner and want a partner, don't have kids and want kids. Like we're all looking at somebody else and comparing. But I've just been paying attention recently to like the people that I admire in life. One example is I just really love his podcast, but Rich Roll. And when you hear his life story, and he, at the age of 40, by all accounts, his life was like in the gutter. He was an addict and he had nothing and he lost his job and he was in jail. And like all these things happened at a point in his life where he was older than I am even now. But how those parts of life are like the most fertile soil for us to really like put down roots that matter and that will sustain us for decades to come, because they force us to look at these hard things and really figure out who we are, not just how we're perceived by others, but like, who am I? No job, no resume, no looks, none of this. Who am I? Like when I'm just me here sitting with my thoughts. And that's terrifying. And also, I think Eckhart says this in The Power of Now, but how it's so much easier in some sense to wake up from a nightmare than it is to wake up from a normal average dream, or even like a good dream. Like you were saying, like from outsiders looking in, your life appeared and our life appeared great. Like you've got it all together. You got the cool jobs, you've got the cool house, you got the cool friends, all these things. Who wants to wake up from that? Nobody wants to wake up from that. But dish up some hard shit and some nightmarish sort of things. And that's when a person's soul, I think it's this little crack in there, right? And we're able to see a little bit of like openness, open-mindedness. Oh, maybe there's some things I need to look at from a different perspective. And then that crack opens up to a whole new world. And that's when we're like, oh.
AKA the dark night of the soul.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
There's the definition.
The chasm.
Yeah. Yeah. What were like some of the, I don't know.
Well, hold on. I want to hear, so what happened when you woke up in Seattle?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Where did that go?
My mom lives up on Whidbey Island, and so I spent a ton of time up there. Water is like my happy place. I spent some time just out in the middle of nowhere, which was really helpful. It was like, nobody knows me. Nobody knows anything about me. I can do whatever I want. And I was so uncomfortable. And then 6 months, so let's see, I was there in May. I meant to just stay for the summer. And then one of my other dog passed really suddenly, really traumatically. And it was like, truly, you're waking up and you're like, oh, how did this happen? So I ended up staying through the fall. And then I met Sean. And it was the weirdest, most perfect thing, because that was not, I had nothing about me that looked impressive. I had nothing about me that it was so raw. And the more, short version of the story is we ended up back here. I was going to you do need to know my life in Nashville. You do need to know me as an adult. My whole adult life was built in Nashville. And so we came back here. He fell in love. And by 8 months into dating, we had moved back here. And I got to move back with a different perspective, because I left going, I'm so claustrophobic. I've got to get out of here. I've got to be able to breathe. And he was coming from the perspective of he'd never known community. He'd never known anybody knowing his business. He's like, this is incredible for people to know your story and know your pain and and step into it. For him, that was everything. And so I got to kind of step back into Nashville and show him that through a fresh kind of lens, if you will. And I don't know if I I'm trying to tell a very long story in a very short, short breath.
You're doing great.
It was really powerful.
Yeah. And you inevitably were changing. There had to be evolution in the silence for sure. But moving back to Nashville, was it a little bit of a culture shock? And you've shifted even slightly, and everyone else was going about their lives. That's what we noticed back when we moved back to Nashville. We just fell back into it. Was it difficult inside of that?
I will say that it started an interesting chain reaction a bit, in that I wouldn't say everyone, but so many people expected me to be exactly who I was when I left. And I think I've been fighting that since getting married, COVID, and then all of this physical stuff, emotional healing, trauma, committing to healing my nervous system and rewiring neural pathways. And I think some of my people are like, but can't you just be the fun one?
Yeah.
Do we have to do all this?
Totally.
It's tough. And I said this before we hit play, that evolving into the best version of yourself is sometimes really lonely.
Totally.
And I did
It
not
has to be.
expect that. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody else knows, right? Only you know.
Yeah.
There can be levels of encouragement that exist inside of close relationships. I guess, though, inside of that, the one healing has to choose to be transparent enough and feel safe enough to even share those experiences with the people around you. And in many cases, when
Yeah.
you're evolving and changing as drastically as maybe we all did, it may not feel as safe. I even remember with family members, they'd
Yeah.
come see us once, and then 3 months later, they'd come see us, and we would be like talking about some other crazy woo-woo shit. And you could feel
Yeah.
distance happening more and more because
Yeah.
they're comfortable where they're at, and we were uncomfortable being there. And so we're constantly quickly shifting, and that causes friction, not necessarily in a bad way, but relationships have to change because of it.
Yeah. It's been really interesting.
I bet.
It's a good reminder, I feel like, to bring as much as possible, because I'm very much guilty of this, is just assuming a person is who they were last time you chatted or caught up. Bringing fresh eyes, open perspective, like anytime, even if it's like micro interactions with people out and about, we don't know the whole story. I don't even know my whole story. So like, why are we expected to know each other's? And some of these conversations too are just so nuanced, but also like vague. There are no words for a lot of these experiences that we've been having. So how do you even open that door and let somebody in when you don't even really know exactly what's happening? I don't know. That's been my experience, at least.
Totally. Or you can't quite articulate it. I mentioned we were talking about, I've been riding horses.
Yeah.
It's like the most incredible nervous system alignment, getting grounded before you are met with a massive animal. You got to get right. You've got, because they
Who
can
only
read.
feels energy.
Yes.
Yep.
They read right through you or see right through you. And even that experience of, this is my intention in going to ride horses, and this is this. And I think even that has been, how do I say this? I constantly think right now I'm trying to explain myself and there aren't words. I can't quite articulate
it's tough.
exactly how it's so
Especially
weird.
like this is new. I have found that the podcast as a whole has helped me ground myself in the foundation I never knew I needed in myself. To be able to express that is in some cases impossible. But once I find even a minute word that I feel like resonates with me on a cellular level, I feel like it's another root in my foundation that helps me identify myself as me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So I have found when this isn't the first time this has happened, like in interviews or even people expressing themselves for the first time verbally in a context like this, it's almost like therapeutic where there are cracks that happen inside of it where you're like, I am fucking this. Not, that sounded bad. I don't know. There's a blossoming that happens when you begin to verbalize who you are and who you want to be. And
Absolutely.
inside of like the Kundalini awakenings or the dark night of the souls, when you go from one thing and come out completely different, and that hasn't been verbalized, there's a piece that's missing because you have yet to fully identify yourself with that person that you've decided to be.
A
So,
million%.
all that to say, you're doing great. It's difficult. It's not
hard.
easy to, and your experiences are your own. And even people that experienced it with you experienced it different than you did. And so to be able to describe your experience into words, like how do you describe getting a download from the universe in a breathwork session and feel like my third eye opened? You have to be okay to sound kooky.
Yeah.
And
it's true.
Not give a shit about what anybody else feels, but me verbalizing those experiences made it that much more real for me. And not only made it more real for me, but accelerated my experience with energy and spirit and source, only because I feel like I admitted it to myself that it happened. Because there's like pieces of you. Sorry, I'm going on a rant. There's pieces of you.
I love it.
There's pieces of you that are still the past you. And in some ways, that will always be the case because that's how it's meant to be. But in some cases, it's finely integrated thoughts and opinions that were drilled into you for 30 years. And those are going to take a while to be broken. And in order for some of those to be broken, at least for me, I couldn't just keep it in here. I couldn't like make the decision that, oh yeah, I don't believe that anymore. I am this.
No, you got to integrate it.
I had to integrate it. And part of that integration was verbalizing it for me.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
No, you're spot on. And as you're talking, I'm realizing that my version, I think, of making sense of evolving into this next generation version of whatever I'm becoming. I actually think metaphor has been the tool that I've used. So I see this guy, his name is Steve, and he's epic. My friend Kula.
Oh, I was like, you see him for real or you see him in your meditations?
No, I see him.
Yeah, is he like chilling with you right now?
Yeah, he's right here in this tiny room. He is a somatic therapist, so he does equal parts talk therapy, and then he'll do table work, body work.
Awesome.
Where we've all read Body Keeps the Score. This is in action. Based on whatever you just spoke about, get on like essentially a massage table, and it's this, he works with this meditative, uses a ton of metaphor, and then is also releasing through acupressure, releasing the physical trauma at the same time. It's the most fascinating thing I've ever done. And I think as you were talking is the realization that I won't have the words. I can't really fully explain 100%. It. But I think being able to have this metaphorical, like my favorite one that I use all the time, which is a bit of a diversion from, I guess it's a protective mechanism at this point, but we were doing this whole kind of, not necessarily inner child work, but talking a lot about the age that I was when I had my first trauma. Yeah. And he was like, picture you standing across the counter from yourself in your childhood home and you're 13 years old. And he walked me through this meditation and this whole thing. And the whole intention was, we talked about when I was 13, I went through my dad got sick with cancer and he ended up passing when I was 14. And we were talking about this 13 age and all of what I was holding on to from being that age and walking through something so horrifying. And he had me in this meditative state, standing across the counter from the 13-year-old version of myself in my childhood home. And I was like, I can't do this because what's coming up is so much criticism. I'm like, girl, if you did not wear your eyeliner that way, you would save yourself some time. Let's fix something. And she's looking at me going, girl, you're looking a little puffy. Let's not wear our hair that way. Is that cool these days? And he said, is there a way that you could suck all of that energy out of both of you and suck it into and make it another entity in the room? Ooh. Okay, so we kind of walked through this whole process, and he eventually, short version of the story, he's like, where would you feel safe as you're imagining your childhood home? Where would you feel safe that this critical being was? I said, let's just put him outside. Let's just put it and close the doors. They're French doors. I can see it, but I just want it away. Yep. And we worked through this whole meditation and we went through this whole thing. And at the end of it, he was like, is there a world in which you would feel safe bringing that person back in? And or that entity or whatever that orb, blurb, whatever it is, back in the room. And he said you could use 2 800-pound gorillas that are restraining it. You could have a glass box where only you had the button. And I literally started crying, laughing. And I was like, no, I think I need a splatter gun. He was like, what? I was like, no, hear me out. And this is in like a meditative place. And I can't help but just laugh. Yeah. And I was like, it's the kind of thing where if it comes at me with criticism, I know that I've got this metaphorical splatter gun. Yeah. No, that's on you. That has nothing to do with me. And it's funny that like these metaphorical tools have actually been the kind of guiding principle that's moved me through so much healing. Where now I'm like using that with clients. I use that with friendships where I'm like, you got a lot of paint on you right now. And I know where to put you accordingly to feel safe. And that's fascinating. I think as you were talking, I was like, all of these metaphors have become really humorous. Yeah. They're my own kind of personality and coping mechanism, putting words to something I literally can't put words to.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I went to a
feel free to take a splatter gun.
There you go.
I was about to say noted. I got a couple of client calls this week. I may be bringing that to the table.
Splatter gun. I love it. I went to a vasovagal theory workshop a couple weekends ago, and it was super interesting. And they gave an exercise that reminds me so much of that, and it was powerful. But you essentially draw, which I think for people you don't even have to be gifted with drawing or art or anything like that. But she had you draw a scene that represented any sort of trauma or whatever in childhood or any point along your life. Just a time that you find yourself going back to subconsciously. So I think her example was she was at the dinner table and her dad was screaming at her mom about something. I can't remember. So you draw that scene exactly how you just picture it, and you can write little conversation bubbles, whatever. And then next you flip to the next page and draw the scene with different tools that you wished you had, tools that you wished maybe your mom or dad had, and like just you add different variations with every subsequent drawing. But it feels silly or childish. That's not changing anything. Your dad still screamed at your mom or whatever. The traumatic thing still happened, but it is changing the narratives, the stories that your nervous system is holding on to. Even just having a conversation with that 13-year-old you, whatever you were able to infuse into that memory or that whatever is stored within the nervous system is so healing. Like it does matter and it does completely change the trajectory of things. I think people underestimate that type of work. So that's super cool. I want your guys' name. Next time I'm in Nashville, I want to go.
Oh, he's amazing. He's awesome. I've had more breakthroughs with that kind of work than I have in 10 years of therapy. There's just no way. And I've probably seen him 6 times.
Yeah.
And it's like
incredible.
lightning rod to the system. We're like, oh, that was it? Okay. Now I have the splatter gun and we're good.
Right.
Totally.
Because just like we were talking about, words are insufficient. They just are.
Yeah.
Like our language is not developed to a point to even talk about some of these things. And that's why the somatic piece is so important. And I wish people would understand that, especially people that are dealing with any sort of like physical ailment or whatever, even just emotional distress, like all these things. If you can find a somatic practice, there's truly hundreds that are out there and available to people. A lot of them are free. Like you don't have to pay big bucks all the time. But these somatic practices where we're integrating these kind of like vague things that we don't even really know how to conceptualize, but we're able to move them through our bodies. Like we are energy. Like, of course, these somatic practices help. And things like horses too. Like I want to hear more about that. What kind of things are you, I don't know, healing with horses?
It's wild. So I worked with a coach. There's a story that could go 2 ways. I worked with this coach and essentially talking about the way that we spend our time and like how we spend our time socially, how we spend. And I'm such a curious person, but I don't have any adult hobbies.
Yeah,
and
same.
through working with him, I was like, I need to have an adult hobby that I do alone that is not for social clout. It's not to go visit with people. It's not something I do with somebody. I go alone and it's for me. And started riding horses, which I can't put into words the way that those things just look into the depths of your soul. You're like, okay,
had you ridden before?
I thought I could fool you. I grew up riding just a little bit,
Okay.
but not in a serious way. I went into it knowing that I was going to be really bad, which is way outside of my comfort zone.
Sure.
And knowing that I couldn't fool anybody. I couldn't put on any sort of mask. You're on a massive creature that knows if you're bullshitting them because they don't feel safe and they want you off. And so it's equal parts. The place that I'm riding at now is more like an equine therapy place. And so it's a lot of getting yourself really grounded. You have to gain their respect. So there's like even groundwork where you're just using your body to get them to move in a way around you. And they won't do that until your nervous system is calm. And it's been really powerful. It's been like the gut check of all gut checks. You should. You absolutely should.
Do you ever watch Queer Eye?
Yes.
They did an episode for this woman who has like an animal place.
Farm for special needs.
It's so cute.
Animals, but she then brings in kids with special needs to be a therapy.
It's precious.
my
Anyway, she
awesome.
was like super burned out,
Completely
very dysregulated.
Dysregulated,
But so they flipped the script on her and took her to a like equine therapy place. And I mean, it just made me sob. Like I had no idea that these animals are so capable of, like you said, they don't speak English or language. They speak energy, and watching
Yes.
her kind of process her stuff through this horse was just wild. Yeah. Now I want you to do that for
I
sure,
know.
babe.
I feel like yesterday or whenever we watched it, I was like, oh man, I need to try that. And then you talking about it, it's like the universe being like, try it. Yeah.
Go ride a horse.
Yeah.
Do it. You got nothing to lose.
Out of that, what are your findings in yourself? The horse is obviously teaching you so many things, and obviously regulating your nervous system exists inside of that. But how has that evolved to you?
That is a really good question. My immediate answer goes to I have turned everything in my life, or I am attempting to turn everything in my life into a ritual. I've been using that word a lot. So going out to the farm and driving out there and rolling the windows down, I'm really attempting to make everything in my life feel very meditative and present. And I definitely was not that person in the past. There's this woman, I'm going to back it up a little bit. There's this woman named Alexander Stoddard. She's like the 80s queen of mindfulness and making things beautiful. And she wrote this book called Living a Beautiful Life.
Yeah.
And I'm obsessed. And I think that's like this evolution of who I've been and the fabric of where I've been and what I've built and what I've lost and how it trajects into this next version of, or next like season of my life.
Yeah.
The evolution is if I sit and have a glass of wine with my husband and hear the like birds chirping, I'm so present in the backyard. Or if I'm driving out to the farm and I have this moment with a horse, I'm like, I want to remember this forever. Like taking a million mental snapshots and being really grounded in, I'm never going to get this moment back. I'm trying to make it more of a meditative practice. And I do think that may feel like what may be jarring for friendships right now is I really am attempting that at all times. And I think that just is so different than who I was.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure the way that people are interpreting that.
It's a hard line to balance.
It is. We talk about this constantly too, because sometimes it feels like Josh is 10 steps ahead of me in like spirituality and all these other things. So it's an interesting dynamic between us where I often feel insecure or like he's in some way like therapizing me. It's so important for us all to understand that it's not a hierarchy. It's not someone is further or better. That's never what we're insinuating when we talk about these things, but it is just a truth, a hard truth that when a person changes in any way, that relationships are going to also change.
And I just wish so much that could be celebrated instead of felt like a thorn in a relationship. Kind of like the fine line balance that I was talking about is what you're saying is when you are evolving and maybe that friend in the relationship isn't evolving in the same direction because we're always evolving. It's just whether or not we're in parallel evolution.
Or we're intentional with the evolution.
Right. It can cause huge hurdles in the relationship, and that's just inevitable. There's time and places for those friendships and relationships. And for me, some of those were perfect for the seasons that I was in, but they're not anymore for the season that I'm in now. And there was for sure mourning that happened in that. And honestly, hurt that happened in it too, where you wished it was different, but it's not. But the balance that's difficult is you're not talking shit about anybody. You're just talking about the very true reality that, hey, I'm evolving and going in this direction. And I am celebrating that just as much as I'm celebrating whatever direction you're going in. I wish that not digging on Nashville, it's just because where we were at. I wish that our friends in Nashville, it was safe enough to have those conversations.
Oh, no, that never happened.
Yeah. So what I'm saying inside of that is the balance is really difficult because you're not intentionally talking shit about anybody or talking down about wherever they're at. It's just acknowledging the reality that
I'm different.
I'm different.
Yeah.
And so are you.
I'm different. My friend Anne Marie has a really good metaphor for this, and she's so eloquent with the way that she said it. But it's essentially that everyone is climbing a mountain, and there are people who see the cloud cover and the top of the mountain. That's as far as I can see, so that's as far as I know. And she and I are on a similar path and talk a lot about how it's like, but then you do that one switchback and you're up over the clouds.
Yeah.
And it's not that the journey right before the clouds is a bad one, but I think I found myself with certain people trying to reach below the clouds and pull them up. There's so much to see up here. And it's scary. Evolving and going past what you know is really scary. And so we talk about the mountain a lot. We're like, you're above the clouds. There's a bunch of people up here.
Yeah.
That is a great analogy.
How has that moving above the clouds changed the relationships that existed when you first moved to Nashville?
I think there's just more distance now. And I feel like the people who are spiritually in a box are really afraid of anything above the clouds because it's not within that box.
Yeah.
Peace.
When you said spiritually in a box, that like struck a chord in me for sure, because I feel like that was, I don't know, the better part of my entire life. But just feeling like anything that strayed outside of this very specific framework, like when you think about it, it's almost humorous. And it always felt, at least it felt like it flowed from a place of love, and never felt like I used it for harm, or even the people around me, I don't feel like harmed me per se with it, but it just is almost humorous when you think about how small that box is that I stayed in for 30 years or 27, whatever.
But even those boxes, I'm not playing devil's advocate on this or angel's advocate on this, of that small box may be somebody's truest freedom, and that still needs to be celebrated.
Yeah, for sure.
It just didn't fit for us.
Totally. No, and I appreciate that. I think though, for me, this is when it clicked for me. Somebody sent us a very thoughtful gift for our daughter, and it was a book, and it had to do with Christianity, faith. And I always like proofread these things before I read them to my child, because I'm very just sensitive to messages that she receives. Not that I'll be able to control that for her whole life, whatever, but I just know that there were certain ones for me that were a little bit damaging or just hard to replace. But this book in particular was a story about this small village of people, and it was like very obvious God character. Of course, he's like a big white man with a beard, whatever. But he is teaching these children that he literally built a wall around the village of stones, tall enough so that the children could not see out of the village. And it was just the most obvious metaphor to me. But he was like, don't look past this wall. It's not safe. I built this wall to keep you safe. All that you need is within this wall. One little boy who is curious, heaven forbid, yikes, he's curious. He takes a rock out of the wall. He peers through to see what's beyond. And it's like this, and then he's comes back to the God figure who embraces him, of course. But what did we learn from this scenario? And I was like, is this what we're teaching our children? Like that it is so unsafe out here to look under any rock that we're not, and I get that it's all in this effort to keep us safe and to keep our kids safe, but it's just keeping us small. Like it's just keeping us locked in a cage. And like when we're able to just be curious, like when we can lead with love and curiosity and open-mindedness, like that's when the magic happens. At least it did in my life. But that's tough.
There's Aaron's TED Talk.
There's my TED Talk. But it's tough when you're still in communities, because that was our entire community for the majority of our life. Like, then what do? You just feel like a complete outsider.
You need something that shakes you up.
Yeah.
Big enough that you're willing to detach from all that you've identified with to go find what you need to get to the other side. It wasn't, I've talked about this on the podcast. I would ask certain questions, or I definitely was curious about so many things, but it wasn't until I got sick where I was like, okay, I gotta go inward and figure out what the hell's going on, and I'll come out on the other side. However, I'll come out on the other side. And it's not until those moments, and not saying that everyone has to go through that, but odds are really high that somebody around you has gone through it if you have shifted that drastically. So there is probably a connection to somebody that's gone through a pretty horrible dark night of the soul for you to be influenced enough to shift your trajectory exponentially. Yeah.
I like how you said, and there's people up here. Like there's a lot of people up here. Like it does feel lonely, but like,
although,
never again.
And maybe this is just because of the environments that we've been in that doesn't feel to be true. It doesn't feel like there's so many people above the clouds. You look around, you're like, where the fuck is everybody? I thought this was going to be like a party. And you look around and you have to realize that you're on your own journey, and that whether the people around you or not are going to get places that you are or have been is fairly irrelevant to the equation. Like the greater story, completely irrelevant. It all is, do you feel confident in yourself? Do you know yourself authentically? Which I would have said yes 5 years ago. And little did I know it was a facade, like what you're saying. Then can you confidently say that you're living your most authentic self? And I still can't fully say that, but I'm on a journey to strive for it. Can't say that they're living authentically to themselves.
Yeah, I have a really good friend who yesterday sent me a voice memo, and we grew up in church together. We grew up in the same kind of mental, we'll call it framework for all intents and purposes, and sent me a voice memo yesterday, or a voice memo, and said, I'm having my own kind of spiritual unraveling, and I'm really curious about what your morning routine is like, because you feel like you're really grounded, and my prayer life looks really different, but I don't know how to be grounded. And she's the queen. I mean, she's yoga, Pilates. She teaches, and she was talking about her own, so she can help other people.
Yeah.
But she was like, "How do I get to my own inner
Yeah.
peace, or whatever that looks like?" And she said, "I was driving down the freeway, and I was raging on some guy in traffic, and it's like, okay, we got to find some tether to that like core principle of peace and love and whatever it looks like externally." But she was like, what's your morning routine look like? Because I think I need, to up my game a little bit. If it's not this prayer life that you leaned on for the majority of your life, what does it look like to build new practices or add in new practices for people who, and so I think that's where that Nashville tension is. I think there's a lot of people who are exploring that, or like the four walls of church doesn't really feel like me anymore, but I don't know what the other thing is.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to come ride horses?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, I definitely felt
nerdy.
very untethered for a good, I don't know, 3 years or so when I was shedding this old skin, but like you said, didn't have any new practices to replace it. What does that even look like? For a while, it almost feels like oil and water. I like to pray, to read scripture, like, ooh, I couldn't. And now I'm at this point where I'm like, it looks completely different. And probably to 10-year ago me, I would say, you've got a watered down faith, or this is whatever, you heathen. But now I'm like, I feel so deeply connected to God in ways that I did not even know was possible.
Yes.
God has just taken on a completely different form. Yeah, and so much of it has to do with, like you were saying, making your life sort of a meditation practice of sorts. Like, you can do this stuff. I feel like this is what Eckhart Tolle does just all day. He's just meditating somehow. I don't know, but just you can infuse this stuff into your day. But yeah, it does require a little bit of open-mindedness and curiosity. Like, maybe I'll see what it feels like to light sage and think about what I'm grateful about. That could be it. Yeah.
That's kind of this Alexandra Stoddard of my practices. There's like now it's, the list is long. I was telling this friend yesterday who we were going back and forth. I was like, there's like a whole hour process when I wake up in the morning. It's like I get outside first thing, get in the sunlight, little circadian rhythm reset.
Yes.
I have a little garden, and it's not large by any means, but like watering that garden first thing feels really nourishing and kind of set a little bit of an intention for the day. I have a truth statement that I read to myself every morning, read out loud. And that's very much like who I am in community, who I am in business, who I am in my marriage, who I am physically, who I am spiritually. And it's just like it's evolved for sure over time. Yeah. But I read that every morning, and I really am this Alexander Stoddard thing. Everybody should pick up that book.
Yeah.
And it's outdated for sure. But her whole thing is everything that ignites your senses is a meditation. And she's super into mindset and gratitude, but it's like the 80s version of it. It's the like prim and proper Martha Stewart version of what we're talking about now. And her whole thing is, to your point about saying, just but also pay attention to the way the light hits the wall and the way that the sound of whatever you're cooking, make everything special, make everything a ritual, make everything a little bit more magical. And her whole, it's 500 ways, again, some of them are very outdated, but 500 ways to make your life more beautiful. And I think, that's the goal, is that like really grounded, really centered, really I can infuse a little bit of magic into this moment, and that is like bringing me joy. That's bringing me groundedness. That's bringing me a sense of like purpose almost. So she's become my new spirit animal for sure.
I love that. It all comes back to this radical presence, I feel like, is really the bottom line. If you can radically be so present with all your senses, that's where it's at. I don't know. That's what I've learned. That's what I'm learning over and over again. Our physiology suggests that we are meant to experience things on a sensual level. Like, why do we have so many nerve endings everywhere? We can feel things, we can smell things, we can see things, we can hear things, and we are never present for 90% of it. I don't feel the wind on my face. I do feel it, but I'm not conscious of that. Like you were saying, the way the light hits the wall. Yeah, these are all just so, again, free and not necessarily easy. It requires intention, but like I think we overcomplicate a lot of things in the healing space. You know, like really go outside, feel the sun on your skin, listen to the birds, nourish yourself. If you do those things, you will see improvements in your health and your wellness. But we overcomplicate it.
We really do.
So talk to me a little bit about how your spirituality has evolved. It's a never-ending journey, but you talk a lot about grounding yourself, and those practices help a ton. But spirituality has to exist in this mindfulness space. I know the word spirituality may mean something different to the next person. So I'd be curious to hear, because the last time we saw each other was probably in church.
It probably was.
I'm serious.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
So that was the last time we knew each other on that level, at least in this vulnerable way. So I'd be curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I know. That's a loaded question.
No, it's good. So right pre-COVID, some really good girlfriends and I all got really into Richard Rohr, which again, the 10 years ago me would have been like, you did?
I love Richard Rohr.
How dare you? We started a club called Roaring for Richard.
I love that.
True story. True story. It lasted 2 times because then COVID hit. And that was like our version of this Bible study. My family, when I was a kid, my parents went to a Unitarian church in Seattle, which is very believe what you want to believe. And at the time, as a kid, when all my friends were going to church on Sunday, and it felt like they were part of something. But there's this sense of, like you were saying, Erin, I feel so much more connected to the universe, to God, to feeling. I guess the best way I would say it is for a really long time, it was like, God is in control. God is in control, and I have no control. I think hitting a proverbial rock bottom and then learning a ton about mindset and manifestation and what I actually am in control of reframed everything for me, where it's like, this can be something that we do in tandem. Of course, there are things that are outside of my control. Of course, there is this higher power and this God that is, I really do believe that. But I also believe that the way that I think on a day-to-day basis and the words that I speak to myself, to my husband, to my people, to my friends, that has power. I'm in a place where both can be true. And I think, as we said before, there are so many people who can't see that to be true, that that's really scary. That this is safe and this is scary. And I think even like the way that I view God through people and God through nature, everything is so different, but so much more palpable and more powerful now. And I don't need to call it God anymore.
I was almost about to say, I can't use God.
Yeah, it's a loaded word for Josh, which I get.
I call it divine source or just source, because God has such a connotation of what was for me and still is for so many, which is great, but not for me anymore. I see source in everyone. Like God in us, what we were taught, like source is beaming throughout us all at all times. And we can tap into that energy anytime we want. We just have to be in tune with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like recently I keep having these full circle moments where a lot of these, whether it's like a verse or a concept or whatever I learned in church, that again, for a while was like oil and water with me. I like don't want anything to do with it. But now they're coming around where I'm like, oh, I think maybe that's actually what it meant. So I'm trying to think of an example, but when you were saying like, yeah, God is in all things and in all beings. And it's like, that meant something completely different to me 10 years ago than it does now. But anyway.
And there's something to what Steve would say. I think I've mentioned Steve like 8 times, but Steve would say that you need the spirituality piece of it, and whatever framework, whatever you need to say, you cannot do the healing process without
100%.
that spiritual piece. And his whole thing was like, figure out what it means to you. I'm not going to tell you what it looks like.
Yep.
And I think there's something really empowering to be like, oh, I can explore this on my own. And it doesn't have to be within this very tight, specific structure. I can explore what that means to me and not be afraid of how curiosity or how it might offend people, or if I said the wrong thing, or if I didn't know enough of a very specific scripture, or if I wasn't raised this way, or I wasn't XYZ. There's something way more powerful about finding it for yourself and then having it resonate and be so true in your life. And then I don't know, but that's the magic for sure.
Agreed. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. My experience is, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, but it feels like for the majority, if not all, there's a chronological order to get there. And it's body, mind, spirit. My body was so compromised that my mental state was whack, which means my spiritual state didn't exist. Once my body got to a place where I felt like I had not necessarily control over it, but it was stable, my mindfulness skyrocketed. And I went into the deep depths of things that I didn't even know could exist. Once I got locked in on my mindfulness, my spirituality, I was like easily able to tap into it. I even was like calling myself atheist for a minute, where I was like, I don't believe in anything. This is all just fake. We're in like a simulation here, just like in this complete nothingness. When we die, nothing happens. Like we're here, we're not. But once I tapped into my mindfulness, when my body was in a safe place to move on to my mind, the next thing happened. Does that sound familiar to you?
100%. And I think that's why I'm in this phase. I wouldn't call it a phase. We'll call it a lifestyle of this, for everything being a ritual. And I'm stealing the Alexander. I'm ripping her off completely. But when you start to be mindful about every little thing and paying attention to your senses and your mindfulness and your body, that connection turns on. You can't help but see how everything comes from this very spiritual place. Everything feels so special beyond, I don't even know the words for it.
It's
but
all
yes,
alive.
Absolutely. It's all alive.
Yeah.
And like, I've been working on this project that's just a passion project. That's this idea of this intersection of design and food. And food to me has become that ritual where it's nourishing. There's like that spirituality of nourishing your soul and nourishing your spirit. And then you make this beautiful, you get it from the earth and you put intention and love, and then you nourish other people and there's connection. And I'm like, oh, is this it? Is this the whole thing? We got it. We nailed it.
Yeah. Well, you guys need to connect.
I know.
Yeah, no, can we need to do like a little weekend away.
Yes, please. Oh my gosh, I would love that. But yeah, food is for sure a spiritual experience for me. I just feel like, why would we have evolved with all of, again, like the nerve endings, the taste buds? There is a reason. Like, we're just here to experience. Like, that's the point, is to just be and feel it all, taste it all, smell it all. And so it makes me sad when even myself, like whether I'm rushing in the car and I'm like scarfing down a power bar or something, or a protein bar, that's not the point. Like, the point is for me to sit my ass down and savor every fucking bite. That's just not how our lives are constructed. Yeah, we're not taught that. Like, we are just told that productivity or like all these other things are more important because they keep our world running, but they don't keep our souls running. I don't know. Yeah.
No, 1,000,000%. I had not ever had anybody like give me the framework. So I wrote this book about this whole thing, and it's like experiential, and it's all about food and connection and thinking outside the box, and go make breakfast in the backyard over fire. Take 30 minutes and find that primal instinct. Get outside the box, get out of your own head. It doesn't matter if you think you're a good cook. Go explore, go find that spirituality, that sensory, that whatever it looks like for you, go create. Like that, there's a createdness to it. And I think that's where that spirituality element comes in too, is like, I am wired in a very specific way. to create and have this like tangible experience.
Yeah.
So I finished the book, and then I found this Alexander Stoddard, and I'm like, am I the new Alexander Stoddard?
Here she is in the flesh.
2023 version.
Hey, me.
Her whole thing is that it's really powerful. And I think, Erin, you would be obsessed because a lot of it is about cooking too.
Oh, I love it so much.
It's so funny because recently, so in my morning meditations, I have been asking divine source and my spirit guides come into this space. And I'll just sit there and wait until I feel the presence of that energy. What I've been doing recently is I have just been allowing my thoughts to go where they need to go. I give complete control to my conscious and say, bring up what needs to be brought up. That wasn't the case for me in meditation before. I was having a little bit more intentionality, and I still think that this is intentionality, but it's more leaning with curiosity. I haven't even told this to Erin yet. The past couple weeks, like I would say 3 or 4 times a week for maybe the past month, I've been really navigating through this experience of Erin and food. And we're trying to do a couple things with food for her just because it's a passion of hers and it totally aligns with Ruti. There's so much healing that can be done with food. And with Ruti, sensitivities are one of the sections of Ruti that comes back and it shares what you should stay away from and what you can eat and things like that. And a lot of times that causes a lot of fear for people because it feels like a life sentence of like, you mean I can't eat pecans or whatever? You kind of have to like reframe that your body is working really hard. And anyways, something that keeps coming up is this name, food as a spiritual practice.
That is my main spiritual practice.
But so I'm kind of ripping this because I don't know if you know this, but Erin is a body piercer. She's a certified body piercer.
Only in the state of Tennessee.
I remember.
Yep. Okay. So she went to this school in San Francisco. It was literally the #1 body piercing school in the world. These people body pierced on a whole different level. But the course was called Body Piercing as a Spiritual Practice.
It was, yeah.
It came up in my meditation like 4 weeks ago. And as we're navigating through this, her passion for food continues to grow, but it's evolving in a way where it is spiritual and you can see it. Y'all need to do something together.
Let's go.
Done.
Let's go, Lauren.
Identifying food as a spiritual practice because we get the idea that there's a communal piece to it, but I don't think people understand the end-to-end experience can be spiritual, from literally picking the herbs in the garden to chopping them up to putting them in a sauce, but then serving that on a table of people and the conversations that happen there. It feels like if you combined both of your kind of passions inside of food, something really magical can come out. And I'm just tossing this out into the universe that in my meditations for the past 4 weeks, I've had this food as a spiritual practice thought that has just been evolving. And I am now 10,000% confident that it was meant for this moment right now.
I love this.
Yeah.
That is
so there
wild.
it is.
Let's go.
There it is. Take it however you two want.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
That'd be really cool to do like a weekend that was around healing. Because I think there's something too, and I don't know if you tapped into this with people on food sensitivities and things like that, but especially for women, there's such a fear, and there's so many food fears, and there's so much disconnect. On my own journey, I think the I have to go back to the mind body thing is so important to me right now that I had to go back to all the ways that it was disconnected in the past, finding all those places. And I think surgery, of course, the like really traumatic things, but then you go back to the way that I approached food. Or I was a runner in college, or I wouldn't say I was a runner, but I like ran a couple marathons and really I pushed my body past. I had 6 stress fractures because I wasn't listening to my body, and I just wanted to run and I wanted to hit the time, and my body was breaking and my mind and so I've been trying to, in this healing process, go back to all the places that I created disconnect or leaned into disconnect or fostered disconnect even. And I think food is a huge part of that for women. I know people who just eat their macros.
Yeah.
They just eat what they're supposed to eat. They eat the same thing every day, and we found what works. And I'm like, but where's the love?
Where's the joy?
No, where's seriously.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think there could be something really powerful to some retreat or weekend that was just around food and beauty, and oh my gosh, it'd be so incredible. Healing.
Oh man, I have
Did we just come up
Have
with
fun,
the idea
guys.
of the century?
Have
Let's do it. I have
fun.
a couple other people in
Bye.
mind to invite. Oh my gosh, that would be so fun.
There's an entire reframing that can exist inside of that too. Like sensitivities, as an example, we all have them, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And there are so many ways to cook great food without the things that you can't eat. That almost becomes a
Yes.
creative process and a spiritual practice of even like identifying what you can eat, that nourishing on a cellular level instead of it just being a consumption to fill my stomach. I don't know.
I think we probably all
Yes.
have experienced this, the truth that like creativity is born out of limitations, right? I don't have X, Y, and Z solution. I need to create a new one. That's just how creativity works. And so that's totally what happened for us. It was like, okay, I can't cook with, for a while there, it was like gluten, dairy, soy, corn. What else?
Everything.
Processed
Whew.
sugar.
I
It
was
was just
expensive.
like a lot of things. Oh, legumes was another one. So that was really challenging. It just forced me to get creative in the kitchen and what can we eat that's still delicious and nourishing to our bodies? Yeah, I just think overall, again, like our lives are not set up to take time, really, is like the bottom line. That's why people, I think, don't choose
Yeah.
to do these things. And food is just one avenue, right? If that's not your avenue, that's fine. But we have to start reorganizing our lives to make space to have these
Yeah.
intentional practices. Because if we're just always running on the hamster wheel, of course you're not going to want to spend 30 minutes preparing a beautiful, gorgeous breakfast full of flavor and nutrients. That's just not on your radar.
Have fun, guys.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Here we go.
I can now stop
We will
thinking
have
about that in
to,
my
yeah,
meditation.
seriously.
Yeah,
I
your
can
guides are
go
like,
on and think
finally.
about something else. Yeah, I had the chills. I know this is exactly why I was thinking of it. Yep.
Great, can't wait.
So don't let me down. No, just kidding.
I love it.
Don't let my guides down.
No, yeah. Speaking of passion projects, before we have to come to a close here, I really want to hear about your book that you're working on.
Yeah, there's always passion. I feel like it's like never ending, but this one actually has some legs. And what we were talking about before, to back up, when I'm certain it was the hormonal imbalances from that ectopic, and you have to take like low dose chemo, and it sent my hormones into a still reeling from some of that. And with that came this like huge surge in my cortisol levels, which makes sense. But I would wake up and have all these food aversions. I was gagging in the morning, like nauseous from this massive surge of cortisol. And I had to figure out a way to fall back in love with food, or I was really worried that those aversions were going to take over. And I've dabbled in disordered eating in my early 20s and things like that. And so it's called Dovetail. And it's this idea, this concept or exploration of design and art. And was like, I just need to take all of this creative energy that I'm expending to other people and funnel that inward. And if I don't, I really think I'll regret it. And it came at a time where I needed to play with my food, literally, just think outside the box. And it turned into this thing that, like, I can't even really describe it. It just came out of me so naturally. It was the most insane creative process I've ever been through. It was just like, oh, here, once I tapped into it, it flowed out of me so quickly and beautifully. And so let's see, 15 chapters. Each one is a 5 morning, 5 afternoon, and 5 evening. And they're all different themes and recipes and short stories. And is all of the ways that art and creating the life that you want to live kind of dovetails into, like we were saying before, the rituals of food. And it really is just about making your life really beautiful and thinking outside the box and having food be a vehicle for creativity. And it's been so freaking fun. I just like all I want to do now. Clients are
We know
great,
that
but can we
feeling.
just play with seriously?
Yep.
I have goosebumps like head to toe when you're talking about it. Yeah, I could tell it's from you, but also not. Like when you get that creative sort of whatever you want to call it, download or whatever. I don't know if you've read Liz, is it Liz Gilbert's The Big Magic? She talks about how creativity, it's just going to find you and it's going to work itself through you if you let it. But yeah, I'm very excited to read this book. When does it come out?
It's in conversation with publishers right now, which is
Let's go.
insane. It's insane.
So fun.
I'm like, I love it, but to have other people be like, yeah, that's really cool. I'm like, it was really cool. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
that's
really
crazy.
excited about it.
How did the creative process come to light in that? Because you're a designer. specifically working mostly with brand design and curating
Yeah.
something for maybe like mom and pop to actually becoming a full out fledged brand. With a
Yep.
book, there's a lot of writing involved, there's a lot of organization. Copywriting in general is different than design. How did
Yeah.
you transition yourself into that and find creative flow through it?
That is a really good question. And I was just saying last night that the creative process to just be present and pay attention as you're meant to create something that with no real end goal, it's been fascinating because I have these surges
Mm,
of download, exactly what you're saying.
yeah,
And then I have these lulls and there's no expectation. It's been a
yeah.
year and a
Yeah.
half now of working on this thing. I just try to pay attention when those downloads come. It started with kind of high level concepts and playing. Sean, my husband, is a total foodie, actually, probably a
Yeah.
better chef than I am. And he's a sommelier. And so we play a lot in general. And then it
Mhm.
was like,
Yeah.
oh, what if it became this structure? And what if it looked like this? And then slowly it started to be this Google Doc that actually made a lot of sense and was beautiful and had
Huh, yeah.
story and narrative that kind of dovetailed in with the recipes. And it
Yep.
honestly, I can't tell you, it was a little bit out of body. Like it just kind of
Yeah.
Yeah.
download is the perfect word because it really just came to me. And then the rest has been really fun. My dear friend Maddie, she's shot the whole book. So we've done a lot of
Awesome.
editorial,
Cool.
beautiful visuals that kind of tap into my own natural creative bent. It's been really fun.
Oh, that's so awesome.
I know. We did a ceramics line with my friend Emily. All these people are gravitating toward it. And I'm like,
Yeah,
it does feel a little out of body, or it's I could put this out into the
Mhm.
world, but other people are jumping on board and in the
totally.
boat with me. So it's been awesome.
As soon as people get on board with your idea, you're like, "Okay, this is outside of me. This is
Mhm.
Yeah.
way more than just a quote unquote passion project. This is
Yeah.
divine, and
Mhm.
I have to fulfill this in order and just let it be what it's gonna be, and people will gravitate towards it naturally."
I love it when projects that start as just like a personal healing journey, like
Yeah.
really it sounds like you were just needing to do this for yourself,
Yeah.
but it never stops there if you're open to it, to sharing it. And that's not always not always maybe necessary, but so often when we have these kind of what feels like very intimate personal healing journeys for ourselves, then when we do open it up and kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit, people resonate because nothing is new here. Like we're all
Yeah.
working through a lot of the same things just in our own little way. But yeah, that's really cool.
Totally. Yeah. It's been really
So
fun.
incredible.
It's
I'm
been
really excited
sweet.
for this to come out.
I know, me too.
Me too.
Okay, so it's
Me
called
too.
Dovetail, right?
Yeah, it's called Dovetail. Sean actually helped me with to come up with the name. I was like, "What's like the word for how things fit together and intersect?" And he's like, "Well, what about
Mhm.
dovetail? It's got like kind of a masculine visual of a dovetail joint, but this really
Mhm.
beautiful, almost feminine." And it feels like it's both ends of the spectrum, that it could be
Yeah.
so many different things, and how, and it turned into this really eloquent, beautiful conversation around how flavors fit together. And even if you look up dovetail, like the meaning of dovetail on Google is like how the beautiful the sunshine or the weather for the day dovetails really nicely with the picnic. So the kind of structure of the book and how it played out is this equal parts menus and thinking outside the box, and then also paired with this dovetail, the art of
Yeah.
XYZ. And so the art of cooking over fire, go make
Ugh,
breakfast in your backyard. It
cool.
doesn't have to be
I love
complicated.
that.
Or like the art of
Yes,
hosting, it
I
doesn't
need
have to
that.
be complicated. If there's beauty to it, it can be beautiful and not overcomplicated.
Mhm.
It can be beautiful and not
Mm.
pretentious. And then there's the concept of really thinking about the things that you
Yep.
own in this, like more owning art in a way that's like the bowls that you go
Mhm.
find and the things that you eat off, making that feel more like a ritual. And one of my favorite chapters is about Japanese knives, and it comes from folklore of knife smiths who would make swords
Mm.
for samurai
Yeah.
swords, what have you. They were Japanese samurais were buried with their swords.
Mhm.
Like they have
Oh,
shrines
that's
to this
crazy.
extension of themselves. And they view Japanese cooking knives in the same way. So a lot of chefs see them as this extension of
Oh,
themselves. It's like it truly is an
Wow.
art.
yeah.
So like the chapters all dovetail together in a way that tells a broader
Hmm.
story, but it's been really sweet. It's
Yeah.
just been like the sweetest extension of myself and the two things I love most. And it's been really,
That's
it's been a
incredible.
really wonderful. I would encourage anybody who's going to do the thing to just start to put pen to paper.
Yeah.
Because it might become something.
Yeah.
There's
And
like something
I
to
love
it.
too when I feel like the most beautiful, most quote successful, I don't even really want to use that word because it is the antithesis to actually what I'm saying, but those projects are the ones
Yeah.
that we're not so attached to the outcome. Like you were saying, like this just started as whatever, a personal little thing that you were working through and you weren't attached to exactly how it was going to look, because I feel like what happens is we're working with minds that are limited. Like we only know what we know. The only thing we have are our experiences that we've already had. And so when we're open to being surprised and delighted by the universe, that's when cool stuff can really happen. It's because we're not just, I don't know,
Yeah.
rigid and structured and only using what we've got. So you've tapped into something bigger, and now you've got this thing that you couldn't even have dreamed of, which is so
It's
cool.
incredible.
To your point about like success, I was saying creativity to me is like leaving a legacy. And I'm helping all these other people build
Totally.
and leave a legacy and what they're meant to do. And if this was my legacy, if we had a grandchild who had this like janky book on a shelf and that was the only person
Mhm.
who ever treasured it, to me, that's a
Yep.
win. It's just like
Yes.
a legacy.
Yeah.
And it's like, why
Yeah.
not?
It's when you know you're onto something that's more divine. Like I was saying, this isn't just a passion project. This is your soul's purpose. And
One of them, probably one of many.
there are many in our lifetime, but
Right.
identifying that of, look, if
Yeah.
this impacts one person,
Yeah.
I am 100% content. We said that about Ruti
Yeah.
when we were first starting this. If we could
Yeah.
help one person get better, this is a win. All of this
worth it.
work is
Yes.
meant to happen. It's exciting to hear you say something like that because you're feeling it on a cellular level that you have more of a purpose in this than a passion. Passion has to exist in order to
Yeah.
fulfill a purpose, but without that feeling of purpose, like you divinely need to do this, sometimes it can fall short in various ways. I see it, I hear it, and that's really exciting.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for letting me refine my elevator pitch.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love it.
Every time anybody asks me about it, I'm like, oh, it's everything
Yeah.
that I am. Okay.
Okay, so if people are interested in this, how can they find it?
So the book will eventually be a physical, living, breathing thing. It is digital at this point. So
Yep.
dovetailgatherings.com is the place where I'm playing in the digital realm of inspiration. We're going to do a pre-order on the ceramics in the next month or so
Awesome.
and start to really tell the story of how this all came to be. So that's right now it's just a digital kind of,
Incredible.
it's living in the digital space, but it will
You can
be.
go onto the site and sign up for the wait list though, right? To get notified.
Yes, that's exactly
Yeah,
right.
if y'all want to do that, get
You
on it.
should. Yeah.
I'm on it.
Thanks, guys. Oh, I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
our
hell yeah.
pleasure.
Sweet.
We have to ask you the question
Yeah.
we ask all the people, which is, what is freedom to you? I know we've talked about it a bit here and there along the way, but if you could boil it down, what does that look like in your life?
So this was the only prompt you gave me
Yep.
of what was to come. And two things came up. The first one was trusting your truth. One of the big things that I've been working on is like finding my intuition and really trusting it again. And trusting my body and trusting that it knows how to heal. But I think intuition has been a huge piece of that puzzle in the healing process, is like trusting your gut and paying attention. And the other one, and I'm just saying these out loud and realizing it's like trusting your truth and prioritizing your peace. Like I'm realizing it sounds really cheesy, but those were the two things that came up. It's like, that is freedom to me. Is that like, I really trust my core. I trust that I know what is right and wrong. I trust my yeses and nos. And I have the spiritual practice to trust that those things are coming from a really authentic place and it's not selfish and it's not.
Amen.
Those were the two that came up.
That's fucking free.
Yeah, it is free. Yeah, trusting yourself
Yeah.
wholly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. Yeah, especially with all
Easier
the
said than
messages
done.
we probably received along the way.
Lauren, thank you
I will.
so much for being on. Seriously, I know even asking you, I know nerves can come into that. And I know that you could have easily said no. And we haven't seen each other literally in years. So
Yeah.
this could have been an easy way out. But I appreciate you being vulnerable and
Yeah.
authentic. And I am celebrating you in more ways than you'll ever know.
Yeah, you're killing it.
You are
You guys are the
killing it.
best.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
This was an honor. I really do appreciate it. I love that you guys are having this conversation so boldly, and I am in awe of your ability to do it with a lot of grace and kindness. I think there's a way to do it, and this is the right way. You guys are absolutely crushing the conversation and leaving room for confusion or questions, or I'm right below the clouds, but I think I want to poke my head right up above them. And there aren't spaces like that right now. And so you guys are crushing.
Yeah, we called it Pick a Lane because we genuinely just want to celebrate whatever lane people choose to be in and ultimately just find their freedom. And there is no playbook for that. We are all bio-individual. We have our own ways of doing things, our own ways of finding things. We just really encourage living a curious and open-minded lifestyle. And out of that, I think you're eventually going to find what makes you free. And we're seeing that in you. And so that's so fun to see. It's incredible. So I'm proud of you for doing a lot of hard work and hopping on some horses. I'm sorry you had to go through a lot, but in a way, it's such a gift and it always will be. And I think the ripple effect of that is going to be huge. So don't get discouraged when you hit roadblocks or there's friction in relationships or things not working the way you intended them to be. It's all divinely working out and sources got your back.
It's true. Mic drop.
What a way to, mic drop. What a way to go about the rest of my Tuesday.
There you go. We should start every weekday like this.
I know Tuesdays can kind of be weird because they're like that awkward cousin that's not hump day, but not the start of the week.
That's
so
true.
There you go.
Yeah, right.
Well, y'all, thank you so much for listening. This was a sweet podcast. I'm amped for this one to go live.
Me too.
Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.